Radio TV phono nut here, and we have a Crosley Bakelite case that's painted white from the factory. Radio, 5-tube series string radio from probably about 1947 or so, and it has a nice spring-loaded lucite handle on top. This was given to me some time back by a friend, and I believe he got it as part of a collection from some guy, and then that guy got it from somebody else who repairs radios, and his sticker is on the back of the set. And I wish this would focus where we could see it. Bob Feuder, or however you pronounce it, antique radio, repair, buy, sell, and trade. Okay, he's out of New Hampshire. My friend said it worked, but he said the best of his memory, it just didn't seem as sensitive as it should be. Now, it does have the original power cord on it, but it's starting to develop some cracks in the insulation, so we probably want to replace that at some point, but let's see what happens. Let's see. Alright, it's already turned on, so we'll let it warm up, see what it does. It's about almost midnight, so this thing should pick up some DX if it's in proper order. No, it wasn't on. Excuse me. This one has a pull-on volume control, which makes me think that someone might have replaced that control at some point with a TV control, because it's kind of rare to find a radio with a pull-on power switch. Now, I had one of these years ago, and I honestly can't remember if it had a regular turn-on switch or a pull-on switch. Alright, is anybody home here? Well, it appears that nobody's home. Alright, chassis is removed and exposed. This looks pretty much run-of-the-mill. 5 Loctite tubes, 2 IF transformers. Just a typical late 40s All-American 5. And thankfully this uses the larger style IF transformer, so no silver mica disease to have to worry about. Speaker cone looks to be in nice shape and not dragging, so that's good. Actually, that speaker looks like, I don't know, that speaker looks like it might be a replacement. Which, as long as it works, who cares? Here's the bottom cover removed. I see 5 little yellow capacitors, 2 normal size and a couple of very small ones here. And then I see that the electrolytic filters have been replaced. And I see a couple of original papers that look like they didn't replace. Maybe they didn't need to be replaced. And that switch, I don't know. That, like I said, that might, no, it could be original, because if you look at the tuning shaft, it's kind of brass colored, and you see how it's designed. And if we look at the power switch, it has the exact same type of brass shaft on it, and it's the exact same design as the tuning shaft, so maybe that switch is original. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is start wiggling these tubes, because these Loctiles, they were a good idea, but they tend to, over time, the connections tend to oxidize, and they don't make good contacts. So we'll just start wiggling tubes and see if anything happens. Nope. So tube wiggleism is not going to solve our problem, but I bet you we have an open filament. Alright, this is a model 58 TW, and Radio Museum says 1948, so that would sound about right. And by this time, Crosley was owned by the Avco Manufacturing Corporation, who kept the brand around until about 1957 or so, and then they shuttered the brand because of lack of profits, but they retained the rights to the brand for several more decades until they eventually sold it to the current owners of the Crosley name, which is just really has nothing to do with the original Crosley Corporation. It's just a name slapped on Chinese-made garbage. But anyway, we're looking at the schematic, and this uses a 14. What is this? I need to enlarge this some. Hang on. It's like a 14Q7 oscillator and mixer, 14A7 IF, 14B6. First audio detector and AVC, 50A5 audio output, and a 35Y4 rectifier. And then we use a PM speaker. Now there are many methods I could use to determine what's open in this series tube string. I've already tested the switch, and it has good continuity. I could pull each tube out and test each one individually in a tube tester, or I could pull each tube out and take my ohm meter and read across the heater pins, and then when I find one that reads no continuity, then obviously that's the bad one. Or I could plug the radio in and turn the set on and use my AC voltmeter to measure the voltage across each tube heater, and according to my electronics training, you always read maximum voltage across an open circuit. So when we placed our meter probes across the tube with an open heater, then I would read maximum voltage. The most likely tube to fail would be the rectifier tube. I've seen that many times, where the filament tap would open here. Okay, it looks like all tubes have heater connections at pins 1 and 8, with the rectifier tube having the dial lamp tap at pin 4. So we just simply take our AC voltmeter and check across each tube heater until we find the open one. Well, I believe I've located the trouble, or a problem. It looks to be in the power plug, because I'm checking the AC voltage coming into the set. I have one terminal clipped to the hot side of the line and the other terminal clipped to B-, and whenever I plugged it in, for a second got 122 volts, and then I heard kind of like sparking in the plug, and then it went to 0 volts. And well, that's cute. Alright, when I clip my ohm meter across the power plug, I can... Okay, we'll do it. Before, I could squeeze the plug, hold it. Maybe I flipped the switch off when it tilted like that. Yeah, that's what I did. So let's see, when I squeeze the plug, how the resistance just goes berserk. So yeah, we need a new line cord to get us started. I just snipped off the line plug and clipped my meter directly onto the end of the cord, and we're reading 152 ohms, which is probably about what it ought to be. So that's good. We don't have an open tube heater, because I think I'm kind of running short on loctals. Well, actually, I'm running short on a lot of what's common, because I've used them all over the years. I'm about to that point where I have every tube except what I need. Now, this is not a reusable type plug, so I just cut it apart to try to find out how it failed, and I think we see what happened here. The wire just broke loose from the prong there. You can see where they have the wire soldered onto the plug prongs, and it looks like this one just broke off right there. And of course that could have been exasperated by someone yanking the plug constantly by the wire instead of grabbing it by the plug, and over time it just broke off. Alright, for now I just slapped a plug on the existing wire, and we have a dial amp, and we obviously have noise from the speaker. Let's turn off the fluorescent light and see what we get. That's 1390. That looks like it's coming in a little high.
Convinced at this point that they know you're. It happened recently where a name was given.
1450, 1390. That is wide open, by the way.
Same words and put them in the same order. Vance sued, claiming Terry stole out.
Patients can share and learn from each other. Fill out the online survey and wake up to a better future at
MyApnea.org,
a public service from the American Sleep Apnea Association.
It does seem to be a little bit lackluster. That's supposed to be WLW. It's coming in at about 750. 650. I guess that's 650 coming in at about 700. Alright, dial pointer looks to be about right. Alright, we're going to try to tweak these IF trimmers, see if that wakes it up any. I'll get the generator out later and do a more in-depth alignment, but that was pretty close. Well, when I touched that trimmer, it woke up. I didn't even turn it and it woke up. Alright, that one's right on. And let me get this other one back here. Alright, that looks to be pretty close. That's 1510 coming in at about 1600. So I just touched this trimmer on the IF can and that woke it up. I didn't turn anything, so that makes me think that there's some dirt in there that's screwing things up, or we have a bad connection in there. So we might have to take that out and investigate, and we need to check against the instructions and just make sure this pointer is lined up the way it's supposed to be. It could very well not be. And then once we get that done, we'll go from there. Alright, the alignment instructions say to set the tuner to completely closed position, bottom end of the dial, and then position the pointer to the little tick mark on the end of the dial, and I had to look real close to find it, but there it is. There's the little tick mark, and the pointer, as you can tell, is not oriented over that mark, so we need to adjust that. Alright, we got it adjusted, but it was a little difficult because someone had put a spot of glue on it, looked like super glue, to keep it from moving, and I was trying to very carefully pop that loose without breaking the dial string, but let's see where we are now. Oh, that's pretty bad.
You have them getting past Yukon, but you take a look at Yukon. Freshman, his 3-point prop is 1.5, and he's had like a.
We have the signal generator turned on, and the radio obviously turned on, and plugged into an isolation transformer just for safety. We'll let everything warm up for about a half an hour, and then we'll come in here and check the calibration on the generator, make sure it's at 455 kilocycles, and then we'll do this. Alright, enough time has passed, and I've checked the calibration of my generator. Actually, my generator is out of calibration, but I made sure it was on the right frequency by tuning the Grundig Yacht Boy to 910 and just turning the modulation off on the generator and setting it for a null point. And then we have the generator signal just radiated into the loop antenna, so let's just adjust these and see what we get. See if we get adjust these for maximum tone. Okay, that one was about peaked out. That one's about peaked out. This other one's kind of in an inconvenient place. The dial scale kind of blocks me from getting to one of the trimmers on it. That one was a little bit off. And that was a little bit off. So that takes care of the IF alignment. Now they want us to set the generator at 1620, and the radio dial is already set there. And then we will adjust the oscillator, the smallest portion of the tuning capacitor, for maximum output. Alright, we're all set to 1620. Let's adjust this trimmer for maximum. There we go. Now they want us to set it to 1400, which might be a little difficult since we have a station at 1390. I think we're going to have to go with 1500. That's a little bit further away from our 1450. That would make it easier, so let's do that. Let's go with 1500. Here we are at 1500. Let's set the antenna trimmer, which is the largest of the two sections of the filter capacitor. Let's adjust that for maximum. Alright, that's good. Now let's turn the generator output down some. Turn the radio volume all the way up. Okay, let's see what that I'm connected to the window for an outdoor antenna, external antenna would be more precise, and we're just barely picking up 620 WJDX out of Jackson, Mississippi with the volume wide open. The Grundy Yacht Boy is doing about just as well, and that looks like it's coming in at about 620. And there's no 670 anymore, so turn that down. We're fixing to come into local 910.
He can go into a team that always makes the playoffs under Mike Tomlin.
10-10. 1390.
The Vikings in the gauntlet NFC North were
1450. Let's see if we can get 1490.
Because they're
I think that's it, just barely, but nothing that you can get any good out of. And the Grundy Yacht Boy is really not doing any better with it, so I'd say this radio is probably performing about as good as it was ever capable of performing. And that's 1180 out of Jackson, Mississippi. Now, as far as this dial accuracy, a lot of these dials were really never that accurate. I mean, they were kind of accurate, but we're not talking about mil-spec grade equipment here. But we aligned it like the instructions said, and it's performing pretty well, and we're just gonna leave it at that. Alright, I went back through and tweaked everything again, and that brought our sensitivity up a little bit, which means 1180 is coming in a little better, but unfortunately it's more sensitive to noise too. But that's just the way it goes. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. Believe me, I wished I could wiggle my nose and make all of the interference go away. And there's something barely at 690. The Grundy Yacht Boy is getting it too, barely. The only difference, the Grundy Yacht Boy can do it without the need of an external antenna. That's 620 WJDX out of Jackson, so I think we're about ready to replace the power cord on this and call it a day. And I replaced the power cord, and I had a roll of this stuff, some brown cord that somebody gave me. I don't know how old it is, but it's new enough to have a zip code on the spool, so it's not that old. And it's also new enough that one side of it's ribbed to make it easier to add a polarized plug to, but it looks period correct like what came off of the radio. And I installed this old style plug on it. It's not cracked or anything, but it's kind of deformed, but there's no safety hazards there. But yeah, I tied a knot in the cord, and then we made sure our wires were stripped and twisted so there wouldn't be any little strandies sticking out, and we made sure they were securely under the screws on the prongs. And then we'll take the front here and slip over the prongs to insulate the terminals. Right, there we are. And the main reason for this insulating thing is if you plug this into, say, an extension cord that doesn't cover the whole front of the plug, or if you were to plug this in an outlet with a metal plate, they have this on here just to prevent any possibility of anything shorting out. Now, I was trying to figure out when they might have possibly repaired this radio, and looking closer, one of the filter caps has a 1990 date code on it. So one would assume that it would have been repaired somewhere in that time frame, but although not necessarily, he could have repaired it a year ago or 2 years ago with parts dating from 1990, but I suspect this radio was probably serviced in the 90s sometime. As far as the solder connections, they all look okay, but a couple of things look a little sloppy to me, like this volume control coupling capacitor. It's J-hooked onto the original lead, and the original portion of the lead is insulated, but they did not insulate the portion, the lead on the capacitor body, and it could very easily touch to one of these other terminals, so I think I want to fix that. And these filter capacitors, I mean, there's no danger of them shorting out to anything, but I just really don't like this electrical tape splice job here, so I may see if I can find a terminal strip to put here and mount those that way, although I'm kind of running low on terminal strips, but maybe I can find some. It's amazing how when you're using something and it can just sprout legs and walk off. I was looking for my wire cutters, looked on the table, looked on the ground, couldn't find them, so out of disgust I went and grabbed these other pair that are about worn out, and then I looked down here and see the wire cutters hanging off the chair here, so no wonder I couldn't find them. But I've removed some of the solder from his connection, and it looks like he crimped it really well. It's just, I wished he'd have used some sleeving over this to prevent it from touching anything else and shorting out. Now, had I been the one who originally fixed this, I would have probably not J-hooked. I would have gone from point to point as much as possible. But since he did J-hook, and since I don't want to have to undo everything and go through my new capacitors with longer leads on them, then we're just going to leave things the way he did it, except I am going to insulate this capacitor lead in question. Yeah, capacitors are getting more expensive, so I'm trying to make what I have last as long as possible. But I'm going to show you how I insulate leads when I have to J-hook a connection, and sometimes we have to because the leads on the new components are not long enough to reach from point A to point B. Alright, first thing we do is we take a couple of small diameter pieces of heat shrink tubing and slip one end over the part that we're using as a replacement, and then I slip another piece of heat shrink tubing over the old component lead that's left on the chassis, leaving enough at the ends to where we can bend our component leads back into a J-hook. And then we take a larger piece of heat shrink tubing and run it over the longer of the two leads, because when we join the connections we don't want the heat from the soldering iron to cause the tubing to shrink up just yet. And then we bend both leads back in a hook, join them together, crimp them together, making sure it's nice and neat and nothing sticking out the side that could protrude through the heat shrink tubing. And then we solder it up, let it cool, and then slip our piece of heat shrink tubing over the splice and then heat it up, and that makes for a much neater looking insulated connection that isn't going to short out to anything. Alright, we got the filter capacitors in place along with new wiring for the capacitors, and we stuck with the original color code scheme, red, blue, and black. Now before we go any further, we're going to fire this up and make sure we haven't taken any steps backwards here. Alright, we haven't taken any steps backwards. We lost 620, but it's later in the day now, so that might have had something to do with that. 1180 is still there faintly.
I had odds predictors open.
Total honesty. Everybody know.
Trying to see if I can get 1490. Well, no such luck. Alright, just checking resistors. This AVC resistor, 3.3 meg. I check it one way, it starts at 1.7 ohms and rising. We're up to 2k ohms, it's just slowly rising. Now watch what happens when I flip the polarity. The polarity, 2.6, 2.7 and rising, 2.8. Makes me think this AVC filter cap may be horribly leaky. I'm probably just going to replace it anyway, but let's cut it loose and see what happens. Let me get my pliers in here. Okay, well it kind of settled back at 2.9 meg. Let's flip the leads around and see what it does. Alright, right to 2.9 megs. No problems there, but this AVC cap, I do believe, is very leaky and needs to go. Alright, I changed that AVC filter, and now when I clip across the resistor, it jumps right to 2.9 megohms. And it's a 3.3 meg, 20%, which means it's a non-critical circuit, so we don't have to fool with changing that. I'm going to turn the leads around and see what it does. Alright, right to it, just like it's supposed to. So yeah, that other capacitor was very, very leaky. Now when I jump across the other capacitor, the old capacitor, if you'll stay on there, it's jumping around all over the place. And another resistor I'm a bit concerned about is the current limiting resistor between the cathode of the rectifier and the first filter cap. It's supposed to be a 47 ohm. It's reading 79.2, might as well say 80. That would reduce B plus a little bit, but the main thing I'm concerned about is over time it's only going to get worse given the application it's in, and we need to probably just go ahead and change that. Well, here's one that somebody didn't solder well. The plate bypass capacitor between the plate and the cathode of the output tube. This cathode bias resistor is up in value, so I figured I'd just go ahead and replace it, and whenever I took that loose, I noticed this very loose. So we're going to have to fix that. I may just have to go back through here and just redo all of his work just to make sure. And as I was trying to clean up a connection on this capacitor, another connection on the other end broke off. So yeah, I think we're just going to have to go over all this again. Alright, I think I got everything done. I corrected all of his, or whoever worked on this, his sloppy work, and went point to point with most everything. The only thing I J-hooked was his original volume control coupling capacitor, but I made sure it was insulated. I was able to reuse all of his other capacitors, these three here, and there was long enough leads for me to run from point A to point B. I replaced the cathode bias resistor for the output tube. I replaced the current limiting resistor coming off the cathode of the rectifier, and I replaced the resistor in the, nope, that is the only two resistors I replaced. For the chassis isolation cap, I grounded it in a different place, and I used a 0.05 1 kV disc. They had it grounded under the oscillator coil, which was very inconvenient, so I just put it right here in a more convenient spot. Our across the line capacitor, I changed that from a 630 volt film cap to a 1 kV disc, and I had to J-hook that because my capacitor lead wasn't long enough to reach over where it needed to be. But I think that's about it. I'm about ready to go try it out, and if everything's okay, it'll be going back in the cabinet. I thought I'd check these two paper capacitors that we extricated. One of them is the AVC filter that we showed on the meter was heavily leaky, and if it was reacting that way on the ohm meter with as low a voltage as it puts across it, then it must be bad, and all it's going to do is load down the AVC line. So let's see what happens here. We're not getting no kind of eye-opening to speak of. So let's see what this says about leakage. Yeah, it's leaking even at the lowest setting. It's flashing like crazy. And of course, the more voltage we apply, the worse it's going to leak. Now the other capacitor is a 0.05 that connects between chassis and B-. Its purpose is for chassis isolation and to provide an RF ground for the chassis. It won't keep you from getting shocked if, say, you're in contact with something with a return path to ground and you touch the chassis while the AC power plug is oriented so the hot side is on the switch. But that capacitor is supposed to limit the current to a non-lethal level. You'll still get the crap knocked out of you, but it shouldn't kill you unless you have a heart condition or something like that. However, if that capacitor becomes leaky, then all bets are off. So let's see how it does. We're not really getting much in the way of an eye-opening either, so yeah, it's about the same degree of leakage as the AVC filter capacitor was. So yep, both of them are bad. Well, I picked it up, getting ready to test it and put it back together, and then what do? I go and poke a hole in the speaker cone. I thought I could say that we had worked on one without busting the cone. One of these days I'm going to learn to cut out some pieces of cardboard for various speaker sizes and punch some holes in them that are big enough for air to get through but not big enough for me to punch something through them, and have those ready-made. Whenever I'm working on a radio, I can just put one of those over the speaker and not have to worry about busting the cone, sticking my finger through the cone. So yeah, my wood glue to the rescue. So when that gets tacky, then we can proceed with this, but I believe off camera I'll go through the alignment procedure one more time just to make sure we can't improve it anymore, especially after we perform some work on it. And as far as this radio coming from Mr. Bob, and I'm not going to begin to pronounce his last name, I mean, just because his sticker's on the back of the radio doesn't necessarily mean that he's the one that did the work. No, it's not the worst repair work I've ever seen, but like I showed you, after close examination, there were 2 or 3 solder joints that just weren't all that great. So that's the reason I decided to go ahead and undo the work that was done by whoever did it in the past and just redo it my way. You know, he could have gotten this radio from somebody else who worked on it, and then for whatever reason he didn't want it, so he passed it along to somebody else. Who knows, any number of things that could have taken place. And like I said, with one of the capacitors having a 90 date code and the other one having a 91 date code, then chances are it was probably at least 30 years ago when this thing was serviced. So there you go. So what did we do? We replaced the power cord with one that looked very close to like the original with an old style plug on it. We replaced a couple of capacitors, the AVC filter and the chassis isolation cap. We replaced a couple of resistors, the 150 ohm cathode bias for the output tube. It was up to like 190, and the 47 ohm surge current limiting resistor off of the cathode of the rectifier tube. It was up to about 80 ohms, I believe. And then we aligned it and fix the speaker that I just punctured. I thought I was going to make it through one repair without puncturing a speaker, but I guess I couldn't. I guess I blew it again. So, as far as that IF transformer waking up, when I touched it with my screwdriver, it hasn't acted up anymore, so we're just going to say there was some crud in there, and me messing with it worked it loose, and hopefully it won't give any more problems. But our battery needs to be recharged, and this memory card needs to be dumped, so we'll do that, and maybe by that time the glue on this speaker cone will be tacky enough that we can utilize it. I'll run through the alignment procedure again off camera, and then we will button it back up. Alright, I tweaked on it some more, and that's WSM right smack dab in the middle between 60 and 70, and we are on the storm window for an antenna. It does work better with that. And it's about 6:43 in the evening, so we'll wait till about 9 o'clock when it gets really dark outside and give it a band scan and see what we get. But I think we're about ready to call this one done. 700 WLW. Now, this particular Crosley does not have WLW marked on the dial, but I think by 4748, like I've already mentioned, Crosley was owned by Avco, and I don't think they owned WWL anymore at that point.
Get on the bus. It's like a 17-hour.
It looks like, man, this is eating me up.
750 WSB right smack dab in the middle, between 70 and 80.
To the beautiful tree.
910.
He's outside. I don't know if that's in the road book.
1010, that's pretty close to where it should be.
Belvedere, Illinois plant. So if you're listening and you live in the area,
I think that's 1120 KMOX. That'd be about 1100 right there. So
allow people.
Yeah, that's about right. That's 1160 barely coming in. I'm using the Grundig Yacht Boy to help identify some of these. Hoping I could get 1200, but maybe it's not late enough in the day yet.
Of course I wanted to.
The idea being
that's
that
1190.
Frequencies already
coming in about right.
But it includes things like Social Security.
That's 1200 coming in faintly. Don't know what that is. 1390. I'm not even going to stop there.
Duke 91 to 93 in the post 1985 era, which means we're
that's 1430. I think we may be losing a little accuracy at the top.
And winning this whole thing, how can you not? Right? They check
but that's just the way it is.
Front court, back court, defense, top four.
And that's noise.
I'm good. Make contact with it. It would have been a foul ball.
Funny thing. The director of broadcasting.
And associates, we're just minutes away from tonight's Grand Ole Opry.
It seems to be pretty spot on until you get up to, say, about the last portion of the dial. Make sure this is still, yep, that's still right where it should be. is at 1190 playing Glenn Campbell. I discovered that if we aligned the radio per the instructions, and the dial calibration was off. But then if I aligned it to where the dial seemed to be right over most of the range, then we were off on our frequency. 1620 is supposed to be the top end, but I was getting as high as 1690. So then I aligned it for 1620, and then I repositioned the pointer, and it seems to be doing better.
In this area. So yes, one argument they make is there's no declaration.
Okay, so it looks like some talk crap is coming in on top of it now. Yeah, I had to move the pointer right past the little mark. That's WSM, pretty close to center there. That's 680 Memphis, pretty close.
Manufacturer.
That's 700 WLW right in the middle. That's probably WGN, 720.
Survive. A Buford house party turns into a murder.
Probably 750 WSB. That's 820 coming in right about 800 looks like. But then when we move up,
I thank God for where He has brought me from.
our 910 comes in about right. That's 950 playing R&B, whatever that is. It seems about right on the dial. There's 1010 about right.
iHeartRadio's Score of the Century Award.
That's probably 1040.
The Aaron Store. Get cost savings and superior quality from
That's probably 1120 KMOX.
anywhere Lombardo. Visit LombardoHomes.com to learn more.
Yep, that's it.
They got millions of parts, guaranteed to fit. I'm talking breakdown.
That'd be about 1100 there. So 1120 is about right. That's 1200.
Sunday at 9:30 and 11 a.m. at SPC San Antonio. We invite you to worship with us as we
Yep, that's 1200 right in the middle. 1390 about where it should be.
To beat Creighton tonight, 82 to 70.
1450,
Sweet 16.
kind of where it should be. Maybe a little low.
Suspects or suspects have been publicly identified. Federal, state, and local authorities are investigating. In Polk County, North Carolina, officials say one of three wildfires.
Okay, that's 1510. It's coming in a little low.
0% containment.
But a while ago, I was getting something at 1620 here that corresponded to the grundage, and that's what the service information says is the top end of the dial, so but it's so weak I can't even pick it out now, so I think we're about ready to put this back together and call it done. Now, I think it could probably still be a little more sensitive. It does okay with the external antenna, but not as well with just the built-in loop. But it's not a horrible set. Okay, well now 1620 is coming in a little low, so this thing may be drifting a bit. Here here we are back together on WSM.
Wall Street guys.
Yeah, 1010 must be scraping the bottom of the barrel now. They're running audio from various
And a lot of people see
CBS news programs, including 60 Minutes. This is 48 hours, appears to be. Week-old broadcast from the CBS Evening News.
To break in.
I just don't even see how they can even keep it on the air. But anyway, final band scan. I've got it aligned as best I could. A couple of different times I aligned it to 1620, and then it seemed to want to drift off a little bit, but it doesn't seem to be drifting any further. So let's go to the bottom and see what we can do here. All right, let's see what we got. Something I've seen on a lot of tube radios, it seems like 1450 here wants to come in at the bottom end of the dial. I've never really worried about it because there's certainly no real station on the bottom end of the dial here, and there's really not that much on the bottom end of the dial anywhere that I can pick up except 530 out of Cuba, and a lot of these old radios won't even go that low anyway.
Transgender policies in the military. And finally, the Department of Education.
So that is.
And the Congress didn't explicitly mandate in some cases.
All in tune, you stupid piece of crap.
Congress didn't mandate it.
I'm trying to get the grundig.
This isn't adjudication. This is legislation.
Alright, that's 600.
Article 3 of the Constitution sets up the judiciary to interpret law, not to run the government.
A little low. Alright, that's 630. I'm using the grundig to help assist with identifying stations. Alright, 650 is coming in about where it should be, in the middle.
And my blood sugar skyrockets when I have to go get, my lab and get my blood work last
That's
week.
700 WLW.
I don't care if isn't that personal? Yeah.
Right in the middle where it should be. That's 720 WGN.
22 rifle. Of course you can shoot a raccoon with a 22 rifle.
That's going to be.
Yes, you do. Whether it's legal or not, I don't know. But I like seeing raccoons explode.
750 WSB. That's coming in right in the middle.
I've never seen a kid. I was like, oh my gosh, we no longer have an assistant superintendent for X, Y, and Z program. What are we going to do now? There is a global structure of hierarchical structure for people and
That's 820 out of Dallas, but it looks like it's coming in right dead center of 800. But when we go higher on the dial, those stations seem to be coming in normal, so maybe this dial never was calibrated exactly right.
During that time, I think also they had the
ease
up on them, and that's a lot
probably 870.
When a team is on a massive winning streak.
Yep, that's 870. WWL New Orleans.
Assistant referee raises the flag.
That's going to be 890 WLS. That's our 910, about where it should be. That's 950, which I've not been able to identify. They've been playing a lot of rock and soul music.
Good enough. He wanted to be the boss.
That's 1010 coming in about where it should.
He's been hiding a piece of wire that he's obtained between his lip and gum.
That's probably 1040.
Fix the lock on his cage, and then hiding the wire again, so that he did it 3 times without being
That is
caught.
1040.
And wow. Wire again downward.
The Budweiser First Pitch Breakfast, sponsored by Budweiser, is Thursday, March 27th, and features an unfiltered conversation with Cardinals Hall of Famer Vince Coleman.
1120 KMOX, about where it should be. 1190, it's been playing some music. I have no idea where that's from.
Off those deep levels.
1200, right where it should be. I think that's 1260, that station out of Baton Rouge. It plays R&B.
Your good news gospel station.
1390, about where it should be. And after this, the accuracy seems to fall off a little bit.
Not when there's injuries.
I don't know what that is. Well, duh, that's our 1450.
You get the taste out of your mouth of how he got into the service
that's our
player, whatever it is.
All right, here's 1620 that I initially had set at the very end of the dial. Now, it's still kind of there, but it's not optimum at the top of the dial. But I'm not going to go back in it and tweak anything. That's just going to be the way it is. It's still pretty close. Now, turn the Grundig off. Now this radio it's not an ultra sensitive radio, but it's working better than it did when we first started tuning it. It does better with an outdoor or external antenna, but with the loop antenna it should still do fine on local stations. And of course it would also do better if we didn't have all this noise and interference and garbage.
On the court tonight.
So I guess that's about all I've got for this. I hope you got something out of this. And we'll hopefully come up with some more stuff later. There's that station at 950 that we've yet to identify. Jive Talking by the Bee Gees. Alright, to end this, the mystery station has revealed itself. KXJK 950 AM out of Forest City, Arkansas. And they also broadcast on 106.5 FM. Classic hits, news, and sports. Alright, ownership, Forest City Broadcasting. First air date, 1949. 5,000 watts day, 87 watts night, which makes me wonder if they're currently running on daytime power. Although I know it's not impossible to receive an 87 watt signal that far away from home at night, but it would be more likely that it would happen if they were on day power. So that's the story on that. Alright, now that mystery is solved, that's about all I've got, and more to come later.